Introduction. Rebirth of the Bright Sword World, becoming the company leader of the 358th Artillery Battalion.Li Yunlong. Who the hell knocked out the Sakata United team? Kong Jie. Who helped me take down the Yamamoto Special Agent team? Ding Wei. Oh my, why is there no cavalry camp to send old Li away? Chu Yunfei. Brother Ziyun, you have the final say in the 358 Regiment. Chapter 1. Artillery Battalion, 1st Company Leader. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. In February 1940, in the Jinzhong region. Near the Cangyunling battlefield, the 1st Company of the 358th Artillery Battalion of the Jin Sui Army is stationed. The distant gunfire echoed one after another, and the air was filled with a pungent smell of gunpowder. Chen Ziyun rubbed his eyes and looked at himself in a bewildered grey-blue captain uniform, his face full of surprise. I only played a sword-related game all night, but when I reached the maximum level, I fainted directly. When I opened my eyes again, it seemed like I had already traveled to the world of swords. Memories flooded in, and only then did Chen Ziyun realize that he had become a platoon leader of the artillery battalion with the same name and surname in the 358th Regiment. Chen Ziyun, who lived in his past life, was an absolute fan of swordsmanship. He has watched many related original works, TV dramas, and movies. Therefore, he has thoroughly read the relevant history and is very familiar with this humiliating period of history. The Japanese invaders invaded with iron hooves, the mountains and rivers were shattered, and the people were like grass, allowing them to bully and slaughter. Thinking of this, Chen Ziyun couldn't help but clench his fists tightly. Since I have come here, I definitely cannot stay out of it. He must exert his maximum ability, strike the little devils hard, and make them pay a painful price. At this moment, Chen Ziyun's blood boiled as he said, "Blood debt, blood repayment, repay my mountains and rivers." At that moment, an officer wearing a grey-blue lieutenant uniform from the Jin Sui Army walked over. Chen Ziyun glanced at the bespectacled, slender, and refined lieutenant. Through memory, he knew that the person coming was not only his platoon leader, but also his junior brother Li Yang at the Army Artillery Academy. Li Yang walked quickly and saluted Chen Ziyun, while handing over a document. Chen Ziyun took over the file and checked it, which contained all kinds of data reported by the Artillery Observation. Captain, according to the report from the Artillery Observation Center, a small Japanese artillery squadron has been exposed and deployed in an open space here. Such abnormal deployment clearly shows that the little devils are demonstrating, thereby deterring our team from taking reckless actions. Additionally, upon observing the location on the highland, it was discovered that the little devils were setting up antennas and seemed to be establishing a command center. Li Yang came to the map and pointed to several different locations, reporting directly. Upon hearing this, Chen Ziyun couldn't help but frown, realizing that this little devil was truly arrogant. More than 100 little devils, for mountain cannons, actually want to intimidate a regiment's troops. The 358th Regiment is a reinforced regiment, consisting of 4 infantry battalions and 1 artillery battalion, with a total of 5,000 troops. Not to mention anything else, just Chen Ziyun's company has 4 Jin-made Type 13 mountain cannons. For mountain cannons are trying to scare us, but the little devils really don't take our group seriously at all. Chen Ziyun looked at the map and rubbed his hands, saying that he couldn't wait to fight the little devil. Now he has fused all the memories of the original owner, and the little devil's military strength is obviously not worth looking at in front of the 358th Regiment. Captain, the news from the regimental headquarters is that the elite Sakata squadron of the Japanese 4th Brigade is fighting against the 8th Route. The Sakata Brigade had strong combat effectiveness and directly defeated 2 divisions of the Central Army during the Battle of Shinko. When our regiment encountered them on the road, there were about 300 casualties in less than an hour. If it weren't for quickly breaking away from contact with them, our regiment would probably be completely destroyed. Sakata Nobuyasu, this old devil is not easy to provoke. There aren't many heavy weapons in this 8 paths, so it must be more ominous than good. And the regiment has no intention of launching an attack, it's better for us not to take any action. Li Yan saw Chen Ziyun's thoughts, hesitated for a moment, and spoke up to persuade him. Sangyun Ridge, Sakata United. Upon hearing this, Chen Ziyun was completely certain that the battle that is happening now must be Lao Li's famous battle. The Battle of Kang Yunling breakout. However, it was obvious that Li Yang underestimated Li Yunlong's new regiment. In the end, not only did they not be annihilated, but they also took down the Sakata unit and broke through directly. Of course, the new regiment's breakthrough this time also resulted in significant losses for themselves, and after the war, Li Yunlong was dismissed from his position due to battlefield resistance. Now that Chen Ziyun has arrived, he will definitely not stand idly by. Even without orders from Chu Yunfei's regimental headquarters, he would still support the operation, avoid too many casualties in the new regiment, and try to maintain old Li's position as much as possible. The 4 Jin-made mountain cannons are not fire sticks, they can play a significant role when pulled onto the battlefield. Ding dong, the soldier soul system is activated. At this moment, a mechanical sound rang out in Chen Ziyun's mind. Activation completed, give the host 10 consecutive draws at the beginning. Do you want to proceed with 10 consecutive draws now? Please let the host choose. System. A must-have for travel. Upon hearing the sound of the system, Chen Ziyun was very excited and did not hesitate to choose 10 consecutive draws. In the system lottery, please wait. Reward 1, Basic Firearms Shooting Ability. Reward 2, Intermediate Artillery Command Ability. Reward 3, Artillery Position Grid Map in Kang Yunling Area. Reward 4, Artillery Battalion-1 Company Paper Card Shooting Parameter Table. Reward 5, Coordinate Parameters of Sakata United Mountain Artillery Squadron. Reward 6, Sakata United Team Coordinate Parameters. About a minute later, the mechanical sound of the system rang out again. Immediately after, a prompt sound to activate the reward appeared, and Chen Ziyun felt a sharp pain in his mind. Soon, the relevant information began to be accepted by Chen Ziyun. The basic shooting ability of firearms allows Chen Ziyun to master various shooting abilities of firearms. The intermediate artillery command ability enables Chen Ziyun to master the command ability of battalion and company level artillery. The Artillery Azimuth Grid Map of Kang Yunling Area is a complete artillery combat map of Kang Yunling Area. This map has detailed delineation lines, and the book garden www.zhaoshuyuan.com has marked each directional grid, with its own position already marked. Now, with 4 mountain cannons in a row, simply calculate the distance and azimuth angle between their own azimuth grid and the Japanese Army's azimuth grid to obtain a simple shooting angle. Of course, launching the shelling directly in this way may result in some differences. A series of paper card shooting parameter tables that can be rewarded by the system can completely compensate for these differences. The so-called paper card shooting parameter table is a pre-set set of shooting parameters for different environments. These settings include shooting parameters under various conditions such as wind direction, wind speed, temperature, barrel wear of each gun, and height difference. Then record the corresponding shooting parameter table on paper cards, which will record the specific parameters of artillery shooting at different distances under certain conditions. During combat, each artillery finds paper cards under similar conditions. Then, based on the distance between the self-orientation grid and the target orientation grid, adjust the shooting parameters according to the corresponding distance on the paper card to carry out precise shelling. This is simply the fat that comes to our mouths. If we don't fight, we'll be leaving Baoshan empty-handed. With the combat orientation grid map, there is also a detailed paper card shooting parameter table for 4 artillery pieces. The most important point is the precise coordinate parameters of the Japanese Mountain Artillery Squadron and Squadron. This clearly means that by setting up the artillery and firing according to relevant parameters, one can obtain the results of the battle. How could Chen Ziyun have missed such an opportunity? As for whether Chu Yunfei's regiment agreed or what serious consequences would arise after joining the war, Chen Ziyun didn't care at all. The messenger, immediately bring the second platoon leader Sun Xiong and the ammunition platoon leader Chu Yu. Chen Ziyun arrived at the map and immediately ordered to speak. Chapter 2. Elements of Precision Shooting. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chen Ziyun picked up tools such as pencils and rulers and began his homework on the map. The messenger received the order and immediately went to notify the platoon leaders. Upon hearing Chen Ziyun's gathering of officers, Li Yang immediately realized that war was about to begin. Captain, the headquarters has repeatedly requested written orders from the headquarters to cooperate with the 8th Route campaign. Currently, we don't even have orders from the battalion headquarters. Moreover, the artillery observation only provides a rough location, and we do not have corresponding talents, so we cannot carry out indirect shooting at all. Launching shelling now will not only fail to effectively strike the Japanese army, but will also violate military orders and expose our artillery positions. Li Yang looked serious and anxiously said, trying to persuade Chen Ziyun to give up participating in the war. The so-called indirect shooting refers to the artillery setting up a sheltered position, obtaining accurate shooting data, and using curved shots to covertly launch artillery fire. To obtain accurate shooting data, it is necessary to rely on specialized artillery equipment, such as artillery mirrors, altimeters, and rangefinders, for measurement and calculation. These are all precision equipment, and currently there is no domestic production capacity, relying entirely on imports. A platoon of artillery observation stations only had telescopes, and even the 358th Artillery Battalion could not gather a complete set of artillery equipment. In Li Yang's view, if one wants to participate in the war, only by taking full action can they reap the fruits of the war. Otherwise, it would be difficult for a single company to effectively bombard the Little Devils. A long row, everything needs to be consulted for battle, and even the yellow cauliflower is cold. The so-called fighter jet is fleeting, and such an opportunity is right in front of us. Let's wait and see. I was prepared for what you were worried about. You can rest assured and let go of the fight. I will bear all the consequences. Chen Ziyun looked up at Li Yang and said without any concern. The system offers a series of rewards, but it's a pity if you don't eat the fat that Little Devils have to eat. Not to mention supporting Lao Li in the battle and reducing the casualties and losses of the new regiment, even if taking risks, Chen Ziyun is willing to do so. If a soldier doesn't have a soldier's soul, what kind of soldier is he? Captain, is this a directional grid map? Such a detailed artillery battle map, Captain, it seems that you were really prepared long ago. At this moment, Li Yang noticed Chen Ziyun's homework on the picture and showed a surprised expression on his face. Seeing Chen Ziyun so determined, he took out a pen and paper and began calculating using trigonometric formulas to obtain a simple shooting parameter. Chen Ziyun and Lu Yang both graduated from the Army Artillery Academy, which was established in 1931 and adopts German education. Even the renowned 8th Artillery Science Officer of Huangpu Military Academy is trained by this artillery academy. After 2 years of professional study, Chen Ziyun and Li Yang naturally mastered a large amount of knowledge. Two people collaborate on the mapping task and carefully examine the wind speed, direction, and other data provided by the artillery observation. In no time, Chen Ziyun found the paper card shooting parameter table for system rewards and found a paper card shooting parameter table under similar conditions. When the second platoon leader Sun Xiong and the ammunition platoon leader Chu Yu arrived, they had already calculated the precise shooting of the various elements. Captain, I heard that there is the elite Sakata team from the Little Devils over at Sangyun Ridge. Are we also going to participate in the battle? Tuba Road has the courage to fight against Sakata United. It's embarrassing for us to watch the excitement here. When Lu Yi was in battle, we fought so damn hard that we were defeated without even assembling our artillery. This time participating in the war, we need to show the little devils of Goeri the power of Jin's artillery. Sun Xiong, the second platoon leader, was 5 big and 3 thick, with a face full of flesh and a fierce appearance. He had a hot temper, and after bowing to Chen Ziyun, he couldn't wait to ask. Although Sun Xiong doesn't have any military academy experience, he was promoted from the grassroots and has rich practical experience. In terms of direct shooting, he is a first-class expert who can completely hit wherever he points. Captain, has the regimental headquarters issued an order? How many troops will participate in the war and how many shells will be fired? The platoon leader of the ammunition platoon, Chu Yu, is similar in age to Chen Ziyun and Li Yang, in his 20s. He first received training in the Jin Sui Military Academy Corps, and then entered the Officer Training Corps to study. Coming out of the Officer Training Regiment and being directly assigned as the platoon leader of the ammunition platoon, of course, everyone knows that this is just a transition. The artillery observation station provided information that a small Japanese mountain artillery squadron had set up an exposed position, and 4 mountain artillery were deployed on the open ground. They feel that we don't have the courage to fight against them. That's why they are so abnormal in deploying their positions and trying to intimidate our 358th Regiment. Additionally, there may be some little devils command structures here, but these devils are extremely arrogant and have not taken us seriously at all. Battalion headquarters, there was no order from the regiment headquarters, but I decided to launch shelling, destroy their artillery positions, and then find a way to shell their command headquarters. Chen Ziyun had a serious expression on his face as he looked at the officers present and spoke directly. This platoon leader has no command. Captain, let's ask for your advice. Upon hearing Chen Ziyun's words, Chu Yu stuttered and said. Sun Xiong frowned and stood aside without speaking. Do you know how the little devils describe our Jin Sui army? When encountering the Jin Sui army, hitting the steel helmet with a wooden stick can scare them away. The little devils are deploying 4 mountain cannons to intimidate us. They really look up to us at the book garden www.zhaozhuiyuan.com. Don't use these 4 mountain cannons, I see they can scare our liver and gallbladder by knocking on the helmets. 8th Route doesn't have any heavy weapons, they all have the courage to confront Sakata United head on. Little devil, this piece of fat is right next to his mouth. We don't even have the courage to eat it. At least you are also from Shanxi province. In the face of the enemies who have harmed the father and elderly of Sanjin, you don't even have the courage to fire a gun. Chen Ziyun slammed hard on the table and shouted loudly. Captain, if you dare to give orders, I dare to command the 2nd platoon to carry out shelling. After the battle, if the battalion headquarters wants to kill or cut, I will accompany you. After listening to Chen Ziyun's words, the 2nd platoon leader Sun Xiong's eyes turned red and he was the first to make a statement. Sun Xiong was from northern Jin. When the Japanese attacked, his family did not have time to escape and all died at the hands of the little devils. Chen Ziyun's words instantly ignited the flame of revenge in his heart. Captain, we are not cowards in the 1st row. If the 2nd row dares to fight, we will also dare to fight in the 1st row. Li Yang was unwilling to fall behind. He looked into Chen Ziyun's eyes and immediately said. A company has 1 row, 2 rows, and ammunition rows under its jurisdiction. The 1st and 2nd rows each have 2 Jin-made mountain cannons, which are the main combat forces. At this time, the 2nd platoon leader Sun Xiong and the 1st platoon leader Li Yang successively expressed their opinions. It is irrelevant whether Chu Yu, the platoon leader of the ammunition platoon, supports it. Captain, I obey the command of the company. Chu Yu hesitated slightly and said. I command that the 1st and 2nd rows enter the gun positions, with ammunition support and preparation for battle. Chen Ziyun immediately ordered. Yes, platoon leader. The 3 platoon leaders immediately saluted and replied. Chapter 3. Benchmark Cannon Test Shooting. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The 358th Regiment Artillery Battalion has two artillery companies under its jurisdiction, namely the 1st Company and the 2nd Company. The concentration of artillery in multiple combat operations is prone to being attacked by the Japanese army, so two artillery companies scattered and set up artillery positions. Chen Ziyun graduated from an artillery academy and received German artillery education, so his company set up a sheltered position in a mountain depression. The so-called sheltered position refers to being placed behind natural obstructions, making it impossible for enemy ground observation points to observe artillery. And during shelling, the enemy is also unable to see artillery positions emitting flashes, smoke, and dust. This is very different from the old artillery tactic of placing artillery in exposed positions and adopting direct aiming and shooting. Chen Ziyun issued a battle order, and the 3 platoons immediately began their operations. The relevant precise shooting elements have been conveyed, and Chen Ziyun has great confidence in defeating the Little Devil Mountain Artillery Squadron. The only thing that worried him was that the Sakata United team exceeded their range. The Jin-made Type 1375mm mountain cannon equipped by Ilyan is a replica of the Japanese Type 41 mountain cannon, weighing 540 kilograms. The muzzle has an initial velocity of 360 meters per second, a firing rate of 10 rounds per minute, and a maximum range of 630 meters. The Sakata Squadron is currently advancing towards the front line of Kangyunling, located outside the range of the 1st platoon position. If you want to bombard it, you must advance forward and leave the 358th Regiment position. The 4 mountain cannons advanced forward in the battle, and even if they defeated the Japanese Mountain Artillery Squadron, there was still a great risk. Ding dong, the system has released a task to defeat the Sakata team. After completing the task, the system can give different rewards based on the host's performance. At this moment, a mechanical sound appeared in Chen Ziyun's mind. Upon hearing this sound, Chen Ziyun made a decisive decision to first attack the Mountain Artillery Squadron, and then quickly advance to shell the Sakata Brigade headquarters. Give it a try, bike to motorcycle. Immediately afterwards, Chen Ziyun set off and headed to the 2nd row. Li Yang, the platoon leader, is his junior apprentice in the artillery academy, so indirect shooting is definitely not a problem. However, the 2nd platoon leader Sun Xiong has been using direct shooting tactics for a long time, and launching indirect shooting at this time will inevitably make it difficult to adapt. Chen Ziyun needs to immediately set off for the 2nd row to assist with command. Of course, at this time, the communication unit of the company had already made contact with the artillery observation station by phone. By the time Chen Ziyun arrived at the 2nd row position, the 4 Jin-made mountain cannons set up in different positions had already opened their shells. A company has 2 artillery platoons and 4 artillery squads, each with 10 soldiers serving 1 mountain cannon. The squad leader is also the gunner, while the other 9 soldiers are from 1 gunner to 9 gunners. 1 to 3 gunners are mainly responsible for operating artillery, including aiming, firing, and directional gunners. 4 to 6 gunners are mainly responsible for loading shells, including the loader, receiver, and propellant loader. 7 to 9 gunners, all of whom are breeders, provide warheads and empty barrels to the signal handler and charge handler according to instructions. After seeing Chen Ziyun coming, the 2nd platoon leader Sun Xiong and others stopped their work and saluted him. Entering a combat state, one must not salute, otherwise it is easy to expose one's identity. That soldier, what's going on? Suddenly, Chen Ziyun frowned and pointed at a soldier, saying. The soldier had just stepped over from the gun rack when he heard Chen Ziyun's words and stood still, panicked and uneasy. Without saying a word, Sun Xiong went over and kicked the soldier in the buttocks. Damn it, you bastard, there are no rules. Sun Xiong glared angrily. We can't insult the artillery that fights alongside us like this, understand? Company leader, platoon leader, this is a new recruit. The monitor of class 4 scolded and then explained to Chen Ziyun and Sun Xiong. Chen Ziyun nodded without saying anything. For artillery, artillery is a roaring comrade and brother. There are unwritten rules in artillery, and no one can directly step over the gun rack unless the battle is urgent. A small incident passed, and two squad leaders began measuring the shielding angle and artillery shielding distance for the main shooting direction. This is to prevent the instant detonator from popping out of the chamber and touching the cover, directly burying the entire artillery position. Immediately after, under the command of the gunner, a famous gunner began to get busy. The third gunner began adjusting the main frame, while the second gunner waited for the cannon to lock its firing position, opened the bolt, and observed outward from the barrel to visually determine the lowest gauge. The first gunner aligns the gun body pointer at the lowest gauge to determine the lowest gauge density. Chen Ziyun commanded from the side, providing guidance from time to time. Not long after, the target calibration of the two mountain cannons was completed, waiting for subsequent combat orders. "Captain, how troublesome it is. It's better to just pull it over and have a direct shooting experience." The second platoon leader was dazzled by this operation and couldn't help but mutter softly. Chen Ziyun smiled and didn't explain much. Whether it works or not depends on the effect. Saying more is useless. 129, that's it. 129 are the reference guns, loaded with grenades, ready to shoot. Chen Ziyun pointed to a Jin-made mountain cannon numbered 129 and issued an order directly. The class leader of Class 4 in the second row couldn't help but straighten his chest and look up at Class 3 beside him with pride. Being able to serve as a benchmark gun definitely requires strength. Of course, the fourth class monitor didn't know that Chen Ziyun simply saw the number 129. The fourth squad leader began to convey the command, and the first gunner of the fourth squad heard the command and conveyed it again, while adjusting the scale according to the shooting parameter table. The seventh gunner took out the warhead and handed it to the fifth gunner to set the fuse. The eighth gunner took out the barrel and handed it to the sixth gunner at Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com to load the medicine package. Next, the ninth gunner handed the loaded barrel to the fifth gunner. The five gunners assembled the warhead and barrel, and as the shells were assembled, the five gunners handed them to the four gunners. The four gunners open the breech to load, and as the breech closes, 129 doors filled. Shoot. Chen Ziyun decisively issued orders, conveying them one by one. The second gunner pulled the fire and the shell instantly detached from the barrel. With a collision sound, the gun body retreated fiercely, and dust was flying in the air. The shell quickly swept through the air and landed directly on the open space where the Little Devil Mountain Artillery Squadron was located. The second lieutenant observer Zhou Wenba of the Artillery Observation Station raised a telescope to quickly check the impact point. Subsequently, the signalman began to use the phone for reporting. The system provides a complete azimuth grid, a table of shooting parameters for 4 Jin-made mountain artillery paper cards, and precise coordinate parameters for the mountain artillery squadron. The shooting of the benchmark gun accurately hits the artillery position. Chen Ziyun quickly received a report from the Artillery Observation Center and began issuing orders. First row, second row, load grenades, deploy effective fire. The messenger quickly conveyed the order, and the 4 Jin mountain cannons were quickly loaded. 126 doors filled. 127 doors filled. 128 doors filled. 129 doors filled. Prepare, let go. Chen Ziyun issued a shelling order, and the flag soldiers standing high quickly lowered the command flag. Boom boom boom. 4 Jin-made mountain cannons fired simultaneously, with 4 grenades detached from the barrel and heading straight towards the Japanese mountain artillery squadron. Chapter 4. Effectiveness Shooting. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The Sakata Squadron is currently fully engaged in combat in the Kangyunling area. They plan to break through the Kangyunling interception position and pursue the transferred headquarters command. But here in Sangyun Ridge, Li Yunlong's new regiment and a unit of the decisive death column fought fiercely to block and fully cover the transfer of the headquarters command. At this time, Sakata Nobutaka commanded the 1st Battalion to launch a fierce frontal attack, while the 2nd and 3rd Battalions flanked from both sides. The troops of both sides were caught in a fierce battle, and the new regiment defended tenaciously. The 1st Brigade was repelled by several group charges. Even though the Japanese army engaged in a double-edged battle, there was no progress, which angered Sakata Nobutaka very much. So he pushed the unit forward, personally supervising and commanding the battle, hoping to quickly break through the new regiment's obstruction from the front. As for the 358th Regiment, Sakata Nobutaka was also on guard. Even though he felt that the possibility of the Jin Sui army participating in the war was not high, he still arranged for the joint team's directly subordinate Mountain Artillery Squadron to deploy for prevention. The Mountain Artillery Squadron received orders and immediately advanced to an open space. At this time, 4 Type 41 mountain cannons were in formation on their artillery positions, with their black holes aimed at the 358th Regiment position. According to common sense, the Japanese artillery tactics were relatively advanced and they would not have set up such exposed positions for a long time. However, in the view of Captain Sakai of the Shanpao Squadron, his deployment in this way could completely deter the Jin Sui army and make them lack the courage to participate in the war. For mountain cannons frightened a 5,000-strong unit of the Jin Sui army. Captain Sakai is very proud of this, thinking that the 358th Regiment is just a group of wine bags and rice bags. The only threat posed to us by the Jin Sui army is nothing more than artillery. But their artillery didn't know the tactics of covering up positions and indirectly shooting. They will shoot directly, and as long as they shoot directly with their artillery, we can quickly locate them and strike. Even if the Jin Sui army artillery wanted to shoot indirectly, they didn't have enough equipment to accurately calculate the coordinate parameters of our artillery positions. Faced with the concerns of his subordinates, Colonel Sakai confidently stated. He didn't take the 358th Artillery Battalion seriously, and even felt that his 4 mountain cannons could withstand the impact of the Artillery Battalion's 8 mountain cannons. However, soon after, Chen Ziyun fired 1 benchmark gun in a row. The grenade landed directly on the Japanese artillery position, and as the explosion sounded, the shrapnel quickly spread in all directions. The scorching waves, accompanied by flying dust, spread in all directions, and soon a crater appeared on the ground. The Japanese army's 4 mountain cannons were on open ground without any cover, and shrapnel tinkled on the cannons. As the shrapnel hit the Japanese artillery, these little devils began to howl in pain. A series of Japanese artillery soldiers collapsed in a pool of blood, and the air was filled with a smell of blood. Captain Sakai was stunned when he saw this scene. Your Excellency Squadron Leader, the observation center has not found any enemy artillery positions. The enemy may have set up a cover-up position and are conducting indirect shooting. Soon, a little devil ran to Captain Sakai to report. They cover the position. Indirect shooting. Impossible, absolutely impossible, they couldn't have such a level. This is a test shot, and even we cannot achieve a single test shot that accurately hits the target. Captain Sakai shook his head, not believing that the artillery of the Jin Sui army on the opposite side would have such strength. But as soon as he finished speaking, the overwhelming shells continued to shoot towards him. 4 Jin-made mountain cannons, under the personal command of Chen Ziyun, directly launched effective firing. A series of artillery shells landed on the position of the Japanese mountain artillery squadron one after another, with explosive sounds echoing one after another. As if in the blink of an eye, the Japanese artillery positions were filled with smoke and gunpowder. 4 Jin-made mountain cannons fired a total of 20 shells. The Japanese mountain artillery squadron was directly covered by artillery fire due to the exposed positions set up by the enemy. A Type 41 mountain artillery was destroyed on the spot, and the Japanese artillery suffered more than 30 casualties. Captain Sakai's face was covered in mud and smoke, and he stared at the scene in front of him in disbelief. Ba Jia Yalu, quickly transfer the gun position. First team, second team, ammunition team, quickly transfer the mountain cannons. Ba Jie Yalu, how on earth did they achieve such precise shelling? Captain Sakai gritted his teeth and roared fiercely. The Japanese army attaches great importance to artillery, which can be described in one sentence as, when artillery is present, it kills people. Now Captain Sakai's first thought is to quickly save the remaining 3 cannons. On Chen Ziyun's side, he has received the latest information provided by the artillery observation. Groups of shooting elements were retransmitted, and 4 Jin-made mountain cannons were recalibrated under the command of the artillery commander. Immediately after, 4 Jin-made mountain cannons once again launched their effective shooting. The Japanese mountain artillery squadron that wanted to be transferred was once again covered in artillery fire. A grenade landed precisely near the Japanese artillery, as if it had eyes. As the explosion sounded, a large number of shrapnel quickly spread in all directions. Bullet craters appeared on the ground, and a thick smoke completely covered the artillery positions. Captain Sakai had no further thoughts at this moment, as a grenade fell near him during this round of shelling. The shrapnel, along with the shock wave, instantly tore apart Captain Sakai's body. Looking for Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com, he had already turned into a pile of minced meat. Under the effective command of Chen Ziyun, the Artillery Battalion of the 358th Regiment launched a series of artillery attacks with 4 Jin-made mountain cannons. They fired a full 81 rounds of grenades, and the Japanese Sakata squadron was directly under the mountain artillery squadron, resulting in heavy losses. For Type 41 mountain cannons were destroyed one after another, with around 150 Little Devils and a total of around 100 casualties. More than 40 people were left, hastily dismantling important parts of the artillery and taking them away, and evacuating towards the unit headquarters in a disheveled manner. Upon receiving a report from the observation center, Chen Ziyun decisively ordered a series of 4 mountain cannons to advance rapidly. 4 horses were the first to lead the transfer of 2 Jin-made mountain cannons in the second row, while here in the first row, the Jin-made mountain cannons were quickly dismantled. The Jin-made Type 13 mountain cannon can be disassembled into 8 large pieces, which can be transported by pack horses and mules. Of course, transportation can also be done manually during critical times. Pulling horses is very precious, with only 4 horses in a row, leaving only pack horses and mules. So Chen Ziyun stipulated that the second row should be transported by horse pulling, and the first row should be dismantled and transported by pack load. The remaining shells of the other platoon were transported directly by manpower. Chen Ziyun commanded a company to quickly advance and prepare to begin shelling the Sakata Joint Brigade headquarters. Meanwhile, the headquarters of the 358th Regiment is here. As the sound of continuous shelling echoed, Chu Yunfei and his staff member, Chang Li Gong, came to the roof again to observe. At first, when they heard a test shot from the benchmark gun, they thought it was the 8th Route artillery firing. But as rounds of shelling continued, they realized something was wrong. As they arrived at the rooftop to observe, they found out that the shells were actually fired from the 358th Regiment position. Chapter 5. Shock. You are listening at novelfull.audio. What exactly is Captain Liang Guoping doing? He fired without orders. There aren't many shells in the artillery battalion, and it's difficult to replenish them after firing. This is simply a waste of shells. They are shelling like this and cannot hit the target at all. 358th Regiment staff member Rectangular Li Gong frowned as he stood beside Chu Yunfei and complained. Chu Yunfei raised his telescope to observe carefully. He was the commander of the 358th Regiment, and the defense deployment of the entire regiment was well understood. After some observation, Chu Yunfei immediately realized that the position where the artillery battalion was firing was at. Liang Guoping is commanding the 2nd Company, while Chen Ziyun's 1st Company is shelling. The sheltered positions they set up will not yield much from shelling at such a distance. This Chen Ziyun is just ridiculous. Chu Yunfei frowned and said with an unhappy expression on his face. In his view, indirect shelling without detailed shooting of various elements would not pose any threat to the Japanese army. Chen Ziyun's large-scale shelling is completely a waste of shells. It has been 40 years now, and the Jin Sui army's arsenal has suffered significant losses. In one sentence, the landlord's family has no surplus food left. Tuanzhua, Chen Ziyun's unauthorized shelling should be dealt with. I will send someone over immediately to dismiss him from his position as company commander. Chen Ziyun's actions will inevitably put our team in a passive position. At this moment, Fang Ligong also realized and immediately spoke up. Just before Fang Ligong could finish his words, a messenger rushed over. Report, Regiment, report from the frontline position. The Japanese mountain artillery squadron's position has been covered and hit by our artillery. Preliminary estimates indicate that all 4 Japanese mountain cannons have been destroyed, with at least 100 Japanese casualties. At this time, the Japanese artillery positions were completely destroyed and could not pose a threat to our regiment. The messenger arrived in front of Chu Yunfei and quickly saluted and reported. Upon hearing the report, Chu Yunfei and Fang Ligong stood still, their faces showing disbelief. This is something they never thought of at all. After all, they used to think that Chen Ziyun was completely wasting shells. But now upon hearing the report, Chen Ziyun's shelling surprisingly yielded such results, which shocked them greatly. How did Captain Chen command it? Not to mention their company, even the artillery battalion doesn't have a complete set of artillery equipment. How did they measure the precision of shooting at the various elements so accurately that the 4 rounds of artillery fire even defeated a mountain artillery squadron? Tuanzhua, this is simply a miracle. Not to mention other Jin Sui army artillery, even the Central Army artillery may not be able to achieve it. Fang Ligong took a deep breath and instantly changed his face and said. It's very realistic, if Chen Ziyun is wasting shells, then he must be brought to justice. But now Chen Ziyun's shelling has severely damaged a Japanese mountain artillery squadron, so the conclusion is naturally different. Brother Ligong, don't forget that Chen Ziyun is a top student who graduated from the Army Artillery Academy. He still has the ability, and with his qualifications and abilities, serving as a platoon leader is truly unfair to him. This time he really opened our eyes. The Army Artillery Academy is truly renowned. Chu Yunfei put down his telescope and said with a smile on his face. During the battle at Sanyan Ridge, he always held his breath in his heart. The little devil set up an exposed position in front of the 358th Regiment's position with 4 mountain cannons, which clearly shows off his strength and intimidates the 358th Regiment. Chu Yunfei was naturally very angry when a reinforced regiment of 5,000 soldiers was bullied by 4 mountain cannons. He was only constrained by various factors and was unable to issue combat orders. However, now Chen Ziyun's shelling has severely damaged the Japanese mountain artillery squadron, which makes Chu Yunfei very happy. Just before Chu Yunfei had a chance to be overjoyed, there were messenger soldiers quickly appearing. Regiment seat, report from the frontline position, the artillery battalion's entire platoon is deployed, urgently advancing forward. At present, they are about to leave the battlefield. The front line is asking if they want to intercept them. The messenger quickly saluted and reported. Chu Yunfei and Fang Ligong's smiles faded as they glanced at each other, their faces full of puzzled expressions. They have no idea what Chen Ziyun wants to do. The 358th Infantry Regiment did not attack, but the artillery was advancing. Is this to bayonet the cannon? Tuanzhuan, is this Chen Ziyun? Fang Ligong's expression suddenly became solemn and he said softly. Chu Yunfei frowned and glanced coldly at Fang Ligong. Fang Ligong closed his mouth and stopped talking. Contact the front line. Don't intercept a platoon. Chu Yunfei pondered for a long time before making a decision. With Chu Yunfei's command, Chen Ziyun commanded a company to easily cross the frontline position. A series of 4 mountain cannons, pulled by horses and carried by mules, quickly advanced forward. At this time, on the battlefield of Kangyunling, the joint headquarters set up by the Sakata Brigade are here. Captain Sakata Nobutaka raised his binoculars and looked towards the new position of the regiment, with an angry expression on his face. The 1st Battalion under my command continued to attack, but they never managed to capture the new position and instead suffered significant casualties. This made him very unhappy. He was preparing to adjust his combat deployment, but the sound of gunfire came from behind one after another. Upon hearing such gunfire, Sakata Nobutaka did not pay attention. After all, in his opinion, even if the 358th Regiment were to launch an attack and the unit was directly under the mountain artillery squadron, it would be enough to contain their attack and buy him enough time to react. But not long after, the United Team's Fupu Yozhong rushed over in a panic. "No problem, Your Excellency, the mountain artillery squadron was shelled, and all 97 people below Captain Sakai were shattered. In addition, 10 severely injured soldiers were forced to stay on the battlefield, and 4 mountain cannons suffered varying degrees of damage. They were forced to dismantle important parts and were abandoned. Only 40.3 members of the mountain artillery squadron withdrew, they only carried important parts of the mountain artillery." Yoroyo Nakatsuo came to Sakata Nobutaka and saluted, reporting with a solemn expression. "Nani? Can the mountain artillery squadron suffer such casualties and losses? How could this be? Did the Central Army artillery support come over? What exactly is going on? Even if they encounter elite artillery, they wouldn't have suffered such losses." Upon hearing the report, Sakata Nobutaka couldn't help but stand still. He widened his eyes and showed an incredulous expression. He participated in the Battle of Shinko, where hundreds of artillery guns were assembled in the Second World War. Yen Laoshi was too far away to defend the provincial capital, but he dispatched all his belongings to the front line. Hundreds of artillery fired tens of thousands of shells, but the Japanese artillery was still able to take the initiative in combat. And in this battle, the Japanese artillery achieved astonishing results, destroying many Jin-made artillery. Sakata Nobuyasu did not believe that the artillery of the Jin Sui army had such strength, even the Central Army artillery did not believe it would have such capability. For a moment, Pu Yozhong didn't know how to answer. He quickly contacted Chao Chang, who had evacuated the mountain artillery squadron, and asked him to report. Chapter 6. Artillery Brigade Headquarters. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The Sakata United's direct mountain artillery squadron was repeatedly shelled by Chen Ziyun, paying a heavy cost of casualties. In order to avoid the collapse of the entire army, after the death of Lieutenant Sakai, the remaining 40 or so Little Devils were evacuated in embarrassment. Originally, there was still a second lieutenant among these Japanese soldiers, but on the way, this second lieutenant felt very responsible and committed suicide directly. The Japanese artillery has strict regulations, and discarding artillery carries significant responsibility. So currently, the highest-ranking officer in the mountain artillery squadron is only Chief Chow. Not long after, the Chief Chow arrived at the Joint Team headquarters in fear and fear. Your Excellency, our squadron leader has set up an exposed position in the open space, preparing to use it to deter the 358th Regiment of the Jin Sui Army. But there were elite artillery units in the Jin Sui Army's position, and they secretly attacked us, catching us off guard. They mastered the precise shooting elements, and the shells fell completely on our heads, causing the mountain artillery squadron to suffer heavy casualties. Your Excellency, this is completely different from the artillery tactics of the Jin Sui Army. I suspect they must have received assistance from the Central Army artillery. The Jin Sui Army was skilled in direct sight shooting, and the tactics of covering positions and indirect shooting were not something they could master in a short period of time. And being able to achieve such precise shooting is likely to be an absolutely elite artillery unit of the Central Army. Chao Chang saluted Sakata Nobutaka and quickly began reporting. Sakata Nobutaka frowned and raised his telescope to look at the new front position, his face solemn. The mountain artillery squadron was to guard against the 358th Regiment, but by this time they had already suffered a devastating blow. And the remnants of the mountain artillery squadron were evacuated in panic, with a large number of weapons and ammunition abandoned on artillery positions that could not be seized. In addition, the front position has not been able to break through yet, and if the 358th Regiment attacks from behind, the Sakata squadron will definitely be sandwiched. Order the 2nd and 3rd battalions to each draw 2 infantry squadrons and quickly advance towards the artillery positions. Tell them that no matter what the cost is, they must not let the artillery positions abandon their weapons and equipment and be captured by the Jin Sui army. Contact the 1st Squadron, assign the rapid-fire artillery squadron directly under the joint unit to them, and tell them to break through the frontal position in a short period of time. Sakata Nobuyasu had a serious expression on his face as he began issuing orders for combat. "Hi, Your Excellency, Captain of the Squadron." The squadron's attached friend, Nakatsuke, quickly agreed and immediately arranged for a messenger to contact them. After issuing the battle order, Sakata Nobutaka stood up, holding a telescope, and began to observe the position of the mountain artillery squadron behind him. There is no sign of mobilization in the 358th Regiment. Aren't they planning to take advantage of the victory and launch an attack? The artillery of the Jin Sui army would not have such strength. They cannot calculate such precise shooting of various elements in a short period of time. What exactly are the people commanding this artillery battle and what do they want to do? After some observation, he saw that the 358th Regiment of the Jin Sui army was completely silent, and Sakata Nobutaka murmured to himself. But he didn't know that Chen Ziyun, with a company of troops, had already advanced to the designated position. Li Yang, the first platoon leader, quickly began assembling artillery, while Sun Xiong, the second platoon leader, had already deployed 2 mountain cannons to set up a shelter position. Chen Ziyun quickly calculated through the artillery azimuth grid map and found the corresponding distance parameters through the paper card shooting parameter table. Subsequently, 129 mountain cannons from the 2nd platoon and 4th class once again became the benchmark guns. A test shot quickly released the grenade from the barrel. The little devils in the Sakata team were still busy, and a grenade landed directly on the team. The deafening explosion sounded, and more than 10 Japanese soldiers were hit, some died on the spot, while others began to scream in pain. Sakata Nobutaka squatted on the ground, and many little devils tightly protected him. The Japanese army has strict regulations, even if they stop briefly during the march, they will immediately build their positions. At this point, the team headquarters is naturally reinforced, and even if a grenade hits, it still causes casualties to the little devils. But it is still impossible to accurately kill Sakata Nobuyoshi. On Bagaya Road, the enemy artillery advanced and began shelling the formation site. Immediately disperse and avoid, protect your excellency, the team leader. Contact the 1st Brigade, abandon the face-to-face 8-way attack, quickly withdraw, search and strike the enemy artillery units. The whole body of the team's Fu-Pu friend, Zhongzhua, was covered in mud. He had a panicked expression on his face and quickly issued orders. These little devils all have combat experience, and they know that the best way to deal with shelling is to immediately hide. If you are bombarded and run around like headless flies, you will only die faster. Several Japanese soldiers quickly concealed themselves with Sakata Nobutaka, but after one test shot ended. Sun Xiong's 2 Jin-made mountain cannons in the 2nd row, under the personal command of Chen Ziyun, directly launched effective firing. 10 shells hit one after another, and for a moment, Sakata Nobutaka's unit was covered in artillery fire. Not long after, Li Yang, who had completed the assembly of 2 mountain cannons, quickly joined the battle. 4 Jin-made mountain cannons were fired one after another, with 1 grenade fired continuously towards the unit headquarters. Pu Yozhong was hiding in a shelter, but with a series of shelling, the temporary shelter began to collapse. As a grenade exploded, several pieces of shrapnel rushed in and hit him directly in the chest. Zhaozhuiyuan.com Pu Yozhong did not have time to let out a painful cry and began to die on the spot. Sakata Nobutaka was closely guarded by several Japanese soldiers, but with a series of shelling. A grenade kept exploding nearby, and the temporary team headquarters built by the Little Devils could not provide effective protection. Several Japanese soldiers in the vicinity continued to mesh, and Sakata Nobutaka's entire body was covered in blood donations from other Little Devils. He panicked and grabbed his military knife, his eyes wary as he looked around. But the last grenade landed nearby not far away, and a piece of shrapnel passed directly through his throat. Fresh red blood sprayed out directly, and Sakata Nobutaka widened his eyes and quickly covered the wound with his hands. But the shrapnel from close-range shells has a strong killing power, and Sakata Nobuyoshi felt his consciousness becoming increasingly blurred. Gradually, he lost his signs of life and ended his sinful life. At this time, Chen Ziyun's position was in a row, with 4 mountain cannons firing one after another, and the barrel had already become hot. Several gunners skillfully held wet cotton quilts and laid them directly on top of the barrel. Got it all. Captain, you're just a cannon god. Happy, really happy. I've been shooting mountain cannons for over a decade, and I've never been so happy before. 104 shells, not a single shell wasted, all hit the target. Such a hit rate is unimaginable even in dreams. Captain, you are the cannon god. A platoon of artillery soldiers cheered as they watched the Japanese squadron headquarters still emitting black smoke. At this moment, these artillery soldiers looked at Chen Ziyun with a gaze that was completely like looking at a deity, full of admiration. Chapter 7. Rewards of the System. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ding dong, congratulations to the host for completing the mission of destroying the Sakata Joint Brigade. The system rewards Type 38 artillery team mirrors, Type 93 rangefinders, Type 93 altimeters, and artillery compasses. The relevant rewards have been sent to the Japanese artillery positions. Please go and collect them yourself. A platoon of artillery soldiers were immersed in the joy of victory, but Chen Ziyun remained calm and carefully observed the situation around him through a telescope. But at this moment, the mechanical sound of the system sounded, and as the platoon completed the task of destroying the Sakata unit, the system began to issue rewards. When Chen Ziyun heard the system sending rewards to the Japanese artillery positions, he couldn't help but feel a bit guilty. After all, advancing forward and setting up artillery positions is already very risky. Continuing to advance towards the Japanese artillery positions ahead is even more risky. However, this time the system rewarded a complete set of artillery equipment, which was exactly what Chen Ziyun lacked. With this set of equipment, the overall combat effectiveness of the company can continue to improve. 1 platoon leader, 2 platoon leaders, immediately decomposed the mountain cannon. The ammunition platoon leader left a guard team to guard the mountain cannons, while the others quickly headed to the Japanese artillery positions to clean up the battlefield. Li Yang, Sun Xiong asked the breeders to follow the ammunition platoon and move together. The messenger, report to the front line immediately and request support. Chen Ziyun hesitated for a moment and immediately issued the order. Immediately afterwards, he took out the Jin-made refuting shell gun and directly led the ammunition platoon to set off. 3 transport teams quickly set out with horses, pack horses, and mules. The other platoons immediately executed orders, and the 4 Jin-made mountain cannons began to be rapidly dismantled. At present, the Japanese Sakata Brigade has experienced a brief period of chaos, with its headquarters being covered in artillery fire and completely losing command with various units. The first team is moving towards the joint headquarters regardless of everything, and the flag protection squadron closest to the joint headquarters is also running wildly all the way. When Chen Ziyun arrived at the Japanese mountain artillery squadron with his ammunition platoon, it was silent. The battlefield was filled with a bloody smell, with severed arms and limbs visible everywhere. Several seriously injured Japanese soldiers fell to the ground, motionless, with a faint howl in their mouths. Several veterans of the ammunition platoon saw this scene without any hesitation, drew out bayonets, and directly installed them on their rifles. They arrived in front of several seriously injured Japanese soldiers, and their bright bayonets stabbed directly at their vital points. For mountain cannons and severely injured soldiers have all been abandoned, it seems that the Japanese mountain artillery squadron has been completely disabled by us. Captain, there are quite a few ammunition boxes here that haven't been opened yet. Hee 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 hee, this time our company's shelling, but let the little devils have a good drink. At least 100 little devils have been killed here. Captain, why is this thing like scissors? What kind of telescope is this? Be gentle, that's the artillery mirror, it's a treasure. Several seriously injured Japanese soldiers were dealt with, and the soldiers began cleaning the battlefield. Chen Ziyun carefully observed and soon discovered artillery equipment related to the artillery team's mirrors, altimeters, rangefinders, and compasses. These artillery equipment are all brand new, obviously rewarded by the system. These items appeared on the Japanese artillery positions, and the system arrangement was also very reasonable. After a detailed inspection, Chen Ziyun quickly arranged for the ammunition platoon to transport these artillery equipment and some shells away. He personally led several soldiers to stay behind, gathering other firearms and ammunition for subsequent transportation. Chen Ziyun dismantled the 4 damaged Type 41 mountain cannons and prepared to take away the intact parts. Although the Jin Sui army's arsenal suffered severe losses, it still had the ability to assemble mountain cannons using these components. Of course, the transportation capacity of ammunition platoons is limited and requires repeated transportation. Without any support, they will definitely have to give up some spoils of war. After all, they are just artillery units, and once they encounter Japanese infantry, they will definitely not be opponents. Meanwhile, the headquarters of the 358th Regiment is here. Chu Yunfei and Fang Ligong were shocked, and their eyes were full of disbelief. Regiment, according to the report from the frontline position, the Artillery Battalion's first platoon fired on the high ground with antennas installed. If we look at it this way, it's very likely that this is the team headquarters of the Little Devil Sakata United. A company continued to carry out cover shelling, causing brief chaos among the Japanese troops. So, the Sakata unit's headquarters is likely to be destroyed by a company. Captain Chen truly deserves to be a top student in the Army Artillery Academy. With such abilities, it's really not easy. Fang Ligong took a deep breath and looked at Chu Yunfei, saying with shock. Chu Yunfei stood in front of the map, carefully examining the relevant locations. What a pity. If we can launch a quick attack and launch a direct attack from the side, we will definitely be able to obtain the results of the battle. With the help of Chen Ziyun's divine weapon, even if we completely defeat the Sakata United, it's not a problem. Unfortunately, it's really a pity. The fighter jet is fleeting, and opportunities are left for those who are prepared. Obviously, Chen Ziyun is ready, but our 358th Regiment is not at all prepared. Meritorious brother, the harm of military action is the greatest hesitation. The disaster of the 3 armies is nothing more than doubt. Chu Yunfei took a deep breath and said to Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com with infinite regret on his face. If I had known that the artillery battalion had such strength and could have achieved such results. After receiving the information of the battle at Kangyunling, even if it was a rebellion, Chu Yunfei would fight a dozen. In the Battle of Luyi, the 358th Regiment fought with frustration, and Chu Yunfei always wanted to find a chance to clear his former shame. Regiment Seat, reporting from the front line, artillery battalions advanced and launched shelling, covering the Japanese command headquarters and achieving huge results. At present, Company Commander Chen Ziyun is commanding the headquarters to advance to the Japanese artillery positions to clean up the battlefield. Company Commander Chen requests support from the regimental headquarters to accommodate the withdrawal of the 1st Company. At this moment, the communication soldier once again received a report from the front line and quickly came over to salute and report. Chu Yunfei and Fang Ligong couldn't help but glance at each other. Although neither of them spoke, they had been working together for a long time and had a tacit understanding. Command, 1 battalion enters combat mode, all stationed in defensive positions. Order, Artillery Battalion 2nd Company to enter the artillery position and prepare for shooting. Command, the 2nd and 3rd Battalions to attack from both sides and provide cover for the retreat of the 1st Company. Order, 4th Battalion, serve as the overall reserve team of the entire regiment. Chu Yunfei picked up his baton and pointed to the map, with a serious expression on his face. He personally gave the command and said, "Sun Ming. Arrive. You personally lead the security team and quickly meet with the 1st Company to protect Captain Chen's return. If a platoon leader Chen Ziyun has any accidents, I'll ask you." "Yes, group members." Captain Sun Ming, the deputy officer of Chu Yunfei, immediately bowed and agreed. For a moment, the entire 358th Regiment began to mobilize, and what they did was to respond to Chen Ziyun's successive withdrawal. Chapter 8. Old Li becomes rich. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. The 358th Regiment began to fully respond to Chen Ziyun's withdrawal, while intense combat continued on the battlefield of Kangyunling. On the position of the new regiment, Li Yunlong held a refuting rifle and loudly commanded at the top of his voice. The soldiers launched their firepower and fired bullets at the little devils one after another. Li Yunlong had already received orders from the brigade to launch a new regiment directly from the weak point of Yujieling to break through. However, when Li Yunlong learned that the Japanese army on the opposite side was the Sakata squadron, he had a heart to fight against Sakata Nobutaka. Especially when discovering the location of the Sakata Joint Brigade, Li Yunlong said he would not obey the orders of the brigade. He is preparing to take out Sakata Nobutaka and break through directly from the front. However, the new regiment only has one mortar, which has insufficient range and needs to advance forward to enter the range. So now the new regiment is fully attacking, preparing to advance and launch artillery attacks. But while they were engaged in a fierce battle with the 1st Brigade, Chen Ziyun connected his platoon with artillery fire, and the dense shells directly covered the Sakata Brigade headquarters. Looking at the highland still filled with black smoke, Li Yunlong stared with a pair of eyes and a face full of raging anger. Who the hell killed Sakata United? Dare to fight for meat with me, Li Yunlong, you're tired of living. Immediately after, Li Yunlong started cursing his mother at the throat. In his eyes, the Sakata United team was like the fat on his lips. However, before the new one could be eaten, others had already taken the lead. Captain, this is a mountain cannon shot. It's really impressive. It hits the target with just one test shot. The subsequent cover shelling, with the shells hitting as if they had eyes, did not deviate from the target. This level is too high, this artillery force is definitely elite. The only artillery member of the new regiment, Wang Qingzhu, who had a simple and honest personality, saw this scene and praised him with a full face. Li Yunlong was even more unhappy when he heard Wang Qingzhu, and cursed, prompting Wang Qingzhu to immediately launch shelling on the evacuated 1st team. The 1st Battalion is now frantically evacuating towards the joint headquarters, but the new regiment is constantly launching firepower strikes. The meat from the Sakata United team was not eaten, and Lao Li didn't want to miss out on the delicacy from the 1st team. Captain, the Little Devil's team has been destroyed by someone else. Who am I going to attack now? Wang Qingzhu asked in a simple and honest manner. Why don't you hit me, damn it? Who else can we fight? Of course we'll fight the Little Devils. Li Yunlong was in a fit of anger, he shouted at the top of his throat. Wang Qingzhu immediately set up the only 60mm mortar in the entire regiment. Faced with the evacuated Little Devils, he made simple adjustments and immediately fired the gun. 2 grenades were fired one after another, and 2 Japanese Type 92 heavy machine guns were destroyed to suppress the new regiment. The Japanese army now has no desire to fight, they only want to quickly return to the joint forces. So they concentrated their grenade launchers, first firing grenades, then quickly firing smoke bombs and quickly withdrawing. This time, not only the weapons and ammunition of the Japanese soldiers who died in battle, but also the seriously injured soldiers, were all discarded by them. After all, for them, the situation here at the team headquarters is urgent and they must quickly return. Weapons, ammunition, and severely injured personnel are clearly incomparable to the joint forces. The 1st Battalion broke away from contact with the new regiment, but they threw away a lot of weapons and ammunition. You should know that even if they were defeated in battle before, these weapons and ammunition would be taken away if they could, and destroyed immediately if they could not. Li Yunlong is so capable of fighting, but within a year, he only captured a few light and heavy machine guns. Captain, who knocked out the joint team? This is not stealing meat from our team. Did the artillery units of the division participate in the war? They are really not interesting enough. Captain, should we rush over now and get you a little devil's assistant official sword? After the evacuation of the Japanese 1st Brigade, Captain Zhang Dabiao quickly ran over and enthusiastically inquired. Dabiao, you need to use your brain to fight. The little devil's team has been destroyed. Why are we going there? Now the little devils are retreating towards the team headquarters regardless of everything. Let's go over, not towards the muzzle. Furthermore, the brigade's order is for us to break through from Yujieling. We cannot disobey the order. Li Yunlong raised his telescope to observe the situation on the battlefield, and he spoke calmly. Don't be fooled by Lao Li's rough appearance, but be careful, especially with his strong adaptability on the battlefield. Previously, Li Yunlong wanted to break through head-on because he was worried that he would retreat and the 1st Battalion would come over, putting his troops in a passive position. Moreover, there is a chance to defeat the Japanese coalition headquarters, and even taking risks is valuable. But now the first team has withdrawn from the new team, and a large number of little devils are gathering towards the joint team headquarters. If we continue to break through head-on, it's not an adventure, it's completely risking our lives. Captain, before you. Zhang Dabiao stood still. What are you still waiting for? Quickly clean up the battlefield, and then the whole team takes turns to cover and break through from Yujieling. Take a look, with so many weapons and ammunition, we can make a fortune this time. Pillar, you're a spendthrift with 2 heavy machine guns. You blew them up for me. Li Yunlong looked at the weapons and ammunition discarded by the little devil, his eyes lit up, and he shouted loudly. The soldiers of the new regiment quickly took action and cleaned the battlefield like a whirlwind at Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. Not to mention weapons and ammunition, the little devil's helmets, leather shoes, and clothes have all been stripped off. There are only Jin Sui army troops around here. Do Jin Sui army have the courage to fight against the little devils? Even if they have the courage to engage in battle, their artillery is not as powerful. A test shot accurately hits the target, and all subsequent shells hit it. Not to mention the Jin Sui army, even the little Japanese artillery may not have this ability. What kind of divine is it that destroyed the joint headquarters of Sakata United? Li Yunlong raised his telescope and glanced into the distance, muttering to himself. Captain, you really made a fortune with over 100 rifles, 3 crooked handles, and 2 grenade throwers. In addition, there were 2 destroyed heavy machine guns. The bullets from the heavy machine guns were enough to capture 2,000 rounds. I can't even count rifles, light machine gun bullets, and grenades. There are still over a dozen shells in the grenade launcher. Not long after, Zhang Dabiao ran over, his mouth full of joy. He's really making a fortune. Hurry up, alternate cover, and break through from the direction of Yujieling. No matter who defeated Sakata United, we also gained benefits. Upon hearing that so many weapons and ammunition had been seized, Li Yunlong displayed a dog-like expression and instantly smiled. In his old Li's opinion, having so many seizures is completely more valuable than taking down the Sakata United team. What can we get by taking down Sakata United's headquarters? A paper of commendation. There are so many affordable weapons and ammunition. Li Yunlong smiled and led a new group to break through from the direction of Yujieling. Chapter 9. Confession to Chen Ziyun. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Li Yunlong executed the order of the brigade and began to evacuate towards Yujieling with the new regiment. They still gained a lot this time, capturing many light machine gun launchers and ammunition, which made Li Yunlong very satisfied. At this moment, the 1st Brigade of the Little Devils is fully supporting the joint forces, so there is naturally no extra force to suppress and pursue. Chen Ziyun's company quickly joined forces with the attacking 2nd and 3rd Battalions. A large amount of loot from the Japanese mountain artillery squadron's positions began to be transported back to the 358th Regiment positions by the troops. At this moment, at the Sakata Joint Headquarters, the Lieutenant Colonel of the 1st Brigade, Changjiang Ko Hachiro, hurriedly arrived with his troops. Looking at the disorganized team headquarters, Hachiro Iduchi had a serious expression on his face. Especially when he saw many broken arms and limbs on the ground, he had a very bad premonition. Your Excellency, Brigade Leader, Squad Leader. Your Excellency, Squad Leader, your jade has been shattered. United Fupu Yozhongzhua. Just found his shoulder badge. The squadron suffered a devastating blow, and all personnel were shattered. Not long after, a 2nd lieutenant with a heavy face came to report to Hachiro Iduchi. Upon hearing the report, Ichiwaguchi Shiro widened his eyes and his hands trembled slightly. The captain of the Flag Protection Squadron, who came together, almost collapsed on the ground with his legs weak. The Flag Protection Squadron is the closest unit to the Joint Headquarters and also the Joint Headquarters Guard Force. At this moment, the teams suffered a devastating blow, and they must be held responsible. The so-called Flag Protection Squadron of the Japanese Army is actually an infantry squadron that protects the joint flag. The team flag is very important for the Little Devils. During combat, they will select the most elite squadron to specifically protect the team flag. At the same time, they will also choose the best 2nd lieutenant as the flag bearer, so as to quickly burn the team flag in case of defeat and avoid the team flag being captured. The Little Devils have been fighting outside and have had emergency incidents of burning down the team flag, but none of their team flags have been captured. Not to mention anything else, an elite flag guard squadron is equipped with 9 light machine guns and 9 grenade launchers. Even in the face of an attack from a regiment, they can at least compete for time to retrieve the flag of the burning squadron. Ba Jie Yalu. Jiang Kuba Lang's face was full of anger. He raised his hands and fiercely attacked the captain of the Flag Protection Squadron. The captain became a punching bag and was slapped several times in the face. He felt very aggrieved in his heart. After all, if there were troops attacking the unit headquarters, they could still resist desperately on the periphery to ensure the safety of the unit headquarters. But this time the squadron was shelled, and they had no way to stop it. After all, even if they are not afraid of death and can block bullets, they cannot block shells. Hi, Your Excellency, Brigade Leader. Of course, the captain and lieutenant thought this way, but on the surface, they still had to bow respectfully to show their apology. Jiang Kuba Lang slapped his face a few times, and his anger subsided. Now the unit headquarters have been completely destroyed, and the unit commander, Colonel Nobutaka Sakata, and the unit commander, Yuzo Fura, have been successively killed. So according to the regulations, Lieutenant Colonel and Captain of the 1st Brigade, Hachiro Iduchi, will definitely take over the command. He stood on a high ground, raising his telescope to observe the situation on the battlefield. At this moment, the new regiment made a full effort to break through towards Yujieling, while the 2nd and 3rd battalions of the 358th Regiment happened to launch an attack to receive Chen Ziyun's retreat. Upon seeing this scene, Jiang Kuba Lang thought that Chu Yunfei's troops were about to launch an attack. Order, 1st Squadron, the unit is directly under the Rapid Artillery Squadron, fully defend the unit headquarters. Order, the 2nd and 3rd Battalions to quickly withdraw, and the main force of the unit will gather here at the unit headquarters. Signal soldier, quickly and directly contact the brigade headquarters to provide a detailed report on the situation here. Damn the Jin Sui army, they dare to sneak attack our joint forces headquarters. We must make them pay the price. Jianko Shiro quickly issued the battle order and looked at the 358th Regiment troops in the distance through a telescope. He gritted his teeth and said, "The Japanese army has been hit and suffered casualties, so they are definitely going to launch a crazy retaliation. Now that the joint headquarters of Sakata United have been destroyed, the little devils naturally won't swallow this bad breath." Taking over as the commander, Ichiro Iduchi prepared to gather his troops and quickly launched an attack on the 358th Regiment, completely annihilating them. After all, if the joint team is defeated, it is also the responsibility of Hachiro Iduchi. He wants to retaliate, but also to make up for the mistake. At the same time, the 358th Regiment headquarters observed the outpost, and Chu Yunfei, dressed in colonel uniforms, held binoculars in both hands to examine. Not long after, Fang Ligong, dressed in a colonel uniform, walked quickly with a smile on his face. Tuanzhua, 4 mountain cannons in a row have been withdrawn. This time we have won a big battle. More than 200 Japanese soldiers were killed or injured, and more than 100 shells, thousands of bullets, and several rifles were seized. In addition, the 4 destroyed Japanese mountain cannons' intact components have also begun to be transported back. The most important thing is that this one team directly took out the Sakata United's team headquarters. It's estimated that Sakata Nobuyasu, this old devil, must have had more misfortune than good. Captain, in this battle, our regiment suffered no casualties and can be considered a great victory. Fang Ligong reported excitedly, with a joyful expression on his face. At that time, the Shinichi Regiment was at war with the Sakata United, and he strongly opposed providing support. But now Chen Ziyun has achieved such results in a row, and he is happier than anyone to find the Shuyuan website www.zhaoshuyuan.com. Brother Li Gong, the Artillery Battalion has achieved considerable success, which is truly commendable. But look, the 2nd and 3rd Battalions are just responding to the battle, and the troops are like herding sheep. If such troops continue to encounter the Japanese army, it is feared that the outcome of the Battle of Luyi will reappear. Although my 358 Regiment is a reinforced regiment of 5,000 people, both in terms of combat spirit and ability, it is far inferior to the new 1st Regiment of the 8th Route in Kanyanling. Chu Yunfei slowly lowered his binoculars and pointed to the distant troops, saying anxiously. As a graduate of Huanpu 5th class, Chu Yunfei knows how to fight with ease. Chu Yunfei was very dissatisfied with the actions of the 2nd and 3rd Battalions. Especially against the backdrop of the Artillery Battalion, he was even more determined to rectify the entire regiment. Tuanzhuan, our overall weapons and equipment are not bad, and our troops are strong and strong. With a little training, we will become an elite team. Anyway, the Artillery Battalion's achievement in this battle will definitely boost the morale of the entire regiment. I believe that with such elite artillery assistance after training in the future, our regiment will definitely be able to make a name for itself in Shanxi province. Fang Ligong pondered slightly and immediately said. The order was issued, and the Artillery Battalion decisively seized the fighter jets, destroyed the Japanese Army's headquarters, and achieved considerable rewards, worthy of commendation. At the same time, contact the General Headquarters of the 7th Group Army and pay tribute to Chen Ziyun. Chu Yunfei nodded thoughtfully and immediately issued an order, saying, Lieutenant Colonel of the 1st Battalion of the Sakata United Brigade, and Colonel of the 358th Regiment of the Jin Sui Army, Chu Yunfei. These two people simultaneously generated power to contact their superiors and began reporting. Chapter 10. Different Reactions. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As night fell and the lanterns lit up, the Japanese Army's 4th Field Brigade was stationed in its regimental headquarters. Major General Ryo Ujima, the commander of the brigade, stood in front of the map with a pair of eyes showing strong dissatisfaction. The 4th Brigade belongs to the Strategic Mobile Operations Corps of the 1st Army, and they have strong combat capabilities. After capturing the headquarters of the 8th Root Division this time, Ryo Ujima decisively dispatched Nobutaka Sakata to command the 3rd Squadron to launch an attack. In the eyes of Ryo Ujima, there must be no problem for an elite squadron to defeat their headquarters command structure. However, at Kangyunling, the Sakata team was blocked and never able to break through quickly, which made him very dissatisfied. You should know that Sakata United is an elite team, and such a result cannot be accepted by Ryo Ujima. Your Excellency, Brigade Commander, the 3rd Squadron has sent an urgent telegram. At this moment, the Deputy Chief of Staff of the brigade hurriedly arrived at the brigade headquarters and made a report. Upon hearing the telegram from the 3rd team, Ryo Ujima slowly smiled on his face. Sakata Nobuyasu still has the ability. Have they already broken through the defensive position? Those two Ba-Lu, who want to block the elite Imperial team are simply delusional. How's it going? Have they captured and annihilated the command headquarters of the 8th Root Division? These two Ba-Lu are extremely cunning. If we can achieve the results this time, the military headquarters will reward us. Yoshitaka Ujima turned around and asked with a smile on his face. However, as his words fell, Ryo Ujima noticed the expression on the face of Chief of Staff Nakajima, and he realized that something was wrong. Chief of Staff Nakasa was embarrassed and didn't know how to answer for a moment. He could only grit his head and hand the telegram to Ryo Ujima. Ryo Ujima took the telegram and hurriedly checked it. After seeing the content of the telegram, he froze in place for a moment, with an incredulous expression on his face. This. How could this be? The Mountain Artillery Squadron was dealt a devastating blow, and the squadron was destroyed. All personnel of the joint team, including Colonel Sakata Nobutaka and Colonel Uroyo, have been shattered. Bagaya Road, what are the 3 infantry battalions under the 3rd Squadron really doing? These fools can't guarantee the safety of the team headquarters, Bagaya Road. Upon seeing these situations, Ryo Ujima completely lost his sanity and shouted angrily. Your Excellency, Brigade Commander. The headquarters of the 3rd Brigade and the directly affiliated Mountain Artillery Squadron are suspected to have been heavily shelled by the Jin Sui Army, which is why such casualties occurred. The 3rd Squadron had 3 infantry battalions under its command, which were fully attacking the 8th Root Army at the time, so. That's why they gave the Jin Sui Army artillery an opportunity. Those two Ba-Lu had a strong fighting spirit, and they blocked the main attack of the 3rd Squadron with inferior forces. The Chief of Staff, Lieutenant Colonel, lowered his head and reported intermittently. Ryo Ujima gritted his teeth and glanced at the map, then carefully examined the content of the telegram. At this time, the 3rd Squadron, Sakata Squadron, except for the Yamamoto Squadron, suffered heavy damage and the squadron headquarters were destroyed. 3 battalions fought in succession, resulting in hundreds of casualties and losses. Upon seeing this scene, Ryo Ujima's eyes erupted with anger. How could the artillery of the Jin Sui Army have such strength? They cannot achieve precise shelling. They only set up exposed positions for direct line-of-sight shooting, and even if they make changes, they cannot master advanced artillery tactics in a short period of time. Who exactly caused a heavy blow to the Mountain Artillery Squadron and destroyed the Sakata Joint Headquarters? This must be investigated thoroughly. Ryo Ujima's face turned pale as he approached the map. Such a loss was beyond his ability to bear. More importantly, he bears responsibility for such casualties and the results of the war. According to the report, the shells were fired first from the position of the 358th Regiment of the Jin Sui Army. Your Excellency, Brigade Commander, Chu Yunfei, the commander of the 358th Regiment of the Jin Sui Army, graduated from the Huanpu 5th class and is a so. Called Emperor Student. Most of the Central Army commanders who fought in Jin province were his Huanpu's senior brothers and instructors. So from this point of view, it cannot be ruled out that they received support from the Central Army's artillery. After all, the Central Army artillery was the first to receive German education, and they were able to achieve this. And currently we have some contact with the Jin Sui Army, and this move by the Central Army is completely in their interest. After a moment of contemplation, the Chief of Staff of Zhongzhou began to analyze and speak. After hearing this, Ryo Ujima nodded in agreement. Order, Takashi Ichiguchi will take over the command, and the 3rd Squadron will rest overnight in the Kangyunling area before launching an attack on the 358th Regiment. Tu Ba Lu is very cunning. They have escaped the battlefield and it is very difficult to find them. Destroy the 358th Regiment, shake the mountain and let them know the strength of our imperial troops. Ryo Ujima had a cold expression on his face and issued an order directly. This incident caused him a great shock, so he wanted to completely annihilate the 358th Regiment. Of course, the little devils felt that the artillery of the Jin Sui Army did not have such capabilities, and they must have received support from the Central Army artillery. The 4th Field Brigade immediately began issuing orders, while the 3rd Brigade received orders and began preparations. At the same time, in the headquarters of the 7th Group Army of the Jin Sui Army, Commander-in-Chief Zhao Yinfu held the telegram sent by the 358th Regiment and sat in a chair with a gloomy expression without saying a word. The 33rd Army under the 7th Group Army, located at Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com, is directly under the 358th Regiment. The Jin Sui Army adopted a small formation, with a normal field regiment consisting of 3 infantry battalions, directly under the command of communication platoons, mortar companies, and a total force of 1,700 soldiers. Of course, due to the existence of empty pay, in reality, each regiment has only 1,500 soldiers. A few years ago, the Jin Sui Army used brigades as combat units, and its main infantry brigade only had over 4,000 troops. Although the 358 Regiment has 5,000 members, it is still classified at the regimental level, and there is clearly a story behind it. Although Chu Yunfei is a fellow villager of Jin province from Yanlaoshi, he is still a student from Huangpu. Until now, there is a large number of central armies in Jin province, and Chu Yunfei's identity is naturally somewhat awkward. Yanlaoshi was very suspicious. For Chu Yunfei, it was obvious that he was highly valued now, but he also took precautions. After all, if Chu Yunfei continues to expand and eventually turns to join the Central Army with the Jin Sui Army, then Yanlaoshi's gains and losses will not be worth it. And such a thing has already happened before. Chu Yunfei is so bold. He mobilized his troops to support the 8th Route campaign without authorization and even wanted to pay tribute to the artillery. It's simply wishful thinking. His little captain, how could he know about Officer Yan's grand plan? Now he has taken down a joint unit of the Little Devils. If he kills Sakata Nobutaka, wouldn't this make the Little Devils jealous of our Jin Sui Army? What does he want to do? Does he want the Little Devils to take down our Jin Sui Army and then assist the Central Army in taking control of Jin province? Zhao Yinfu suddenly slammed the telegram onto the table, his face cold and his tone indifferent. Zhao Yinfu, the commander-in-chief of the 7th Group Army of the Jin Sui Army, was one of the 13 Tai Bao of Yanlaoshi, ranking 7th and gaining the trust of Yanlaoshi.